Board of Education meeting. We were in executive session discussing personnel issues, and I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And the flag, there's not one here this time, so it's back here. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Also, to let people know, we are being videotaped. You can't hear? Well, move on up. No. No. I think the mic is for the cameras, though, right? Or for the video? It'll work here? Okay. So we are being videotaped, and I'd like to welcome our participation in government students. If we do not end by 9 o'clock, we'll take a break so you can sign out, and we will start with introductions. Lynn?
Lynn Lenhart. Kate Navarro.
Michael Cooper.
Jody Monroe.
Tom Douglas.
Diane Stever?
Matt Downey.
Laura Beer. Charmaine Ridgesinger. And Judy Kehoe.
Okay, and it's going to be hard for me to read. Didn't bring my glasses. Recognition of visitors on an agenda item. No? Okay. Approval of minutes is, thank you. Minutes of the March 6, 2013 regular board meeting and minutes from the March 12, 2013 facilities vote. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. And student senate report. Is Jamie here, or is anybody from student senate? Okay, sometimes they come in a little bit later. And superintendent's report, Dr. Douglas?
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Stevers. Tonight it's my pleasure to welcome several guests here for our board meeting on the first day of spring. But as we go through this evening, we're going to have the Board of Education welcome some of these visitors as well up in this front sort of horseshoe area. And I'd like to introduce our first individual who is known throughout the community, I imagine known throughout the student body. And I just haven't seen him, but he's a rather tall, distinguished gentleman who's located right across from our office. But he was one of Bethlehem Central's state champion swimmers from eons ago, as when I went to school, and that's Mr. Ken Neff. Is Ken here? There he is. See, now he stands up. So I'd like to bring Ken forward because our first presentation really deals with something that only some unique individuals have the pleasure to move forward. And if I will turn it over, I believe, Ken, you were a state champion in 100-yard back? 100 back. I would sink in about 50 yards back, so I commend you. But I know Ken has some great stories from the past as well. And if Ken, would you introduce the swimming coach for us? Swimming coach? Yes, and Bill.
All right, I guess I'm supposed to introduce the swimming coach.
Do you want us to go up here?
Yes, if we could.
Oh, we need glasses. Gee, Ken, you need glasses now. Gosh.
Bill, I haven't pronounced your last name before. Is Bill here? Vergossett? All right. So I guess I'll introduce the swim coach from this year. I guess you get to introduce
It's my pleasure to and honor to introduce Gunnar Zemmering, this year's 50 freestyle state champion. A little background with Gunnar. This year, Gunnar was also the 50 freestyle champion in the section with a new school record time, which he later eclipsed and brought it down to 21.1 seconds. record that stood since the early 80s or mid-80s. Gunner came from the outside lane 8 after qualifying in the last spot for the A finals to win one of the first state titles or the second state title in quite a while. He is also currently in the running for All-American status. That will not be decided until June when the final numbers are up. And we hope for a very successful senior year as well.
So if we can get the two state champions together for a picture of past and present. So I'm manning spotlight. The question is, which one's taller?
Because I am not a swimmer, I do not want to be in the picture.
Currently only 23 seconds off on the trial step. We'll get there.
And for the audience, one of the questions was about the 2016 Summer Olympics. And Gunnar, and I know Mr. Neff indicated that he was just shy of the Olympic trial times. So Gunnar has certainly put himself on the national map for the district and most importantly, his future. So congratulations and thank you. Additionally, tonight, as we have recognized some of our teams throughout, we had the pleasure of having an undefeated team go into the sectional finals, and I'd like to introduce Coach Matt Bixby to come forward and introduce his team as well, because I know the ladies had a long, hard-fought battle in that final game, but I know their hearts are still in it. So, Matt, thank you.
Before I introduce our team, I just want to thank the board and Dr. Douglas for having us here tonight to recognize us. I want to thank all of you as well for anyone who was able to come out to a girls basketball game. We had an undefeated regular season this year, which is only the second ever in girls basketball history, and we won 20 games in a row, which was the second longest win streak in the history of our program. And so I want to thank any fans who were able to come out, and just to recognize, I'm going to introduce you all, but go ahead and stand up so we can see you. All right. Stay standing, yeah. Because you're going to have to come up here in a minute anyway. So I think what these girls do really is a testament to athletics. These girls are wonderful role models. They really are. And to see the support that they garnered throughout the year, the support from the student body, the support from the other teachers, the support from the people in this district, and I think the recognition that they were able to bring to our school and to our program is absolutely fantastic. And that's really a testament to these girls and the time that they put in and they have dedicated to sports and that they have dedicated to athletics. And I'm very proud of them for what they've done for our school and for our community. We do have two who are not able to be here tonight, Kaylee Rickert and Aaron O'Donnell, who are in spring sport practices right now, so they could not be here. But we have, and you want to come up, right? And come up? All right. We have Brenna Raffi. Kylie McKenna. Gabby Ciccone. Bridget Murphy. Olivia Hughes. Jen O'Keefe. Jenna Ciccone. Maeve Mulderry. And we should not forget our assistant coach, Trish Puccini, as well.
ladies, as your coach goes through, being a former basketball official as well, I miss being out there, but I have to say, watching you as well as all of our other teams throughout, you do represent very much what makes Bethlehem tick, athletically as well as academically as being a scholar athletic team. So congratulations on those accomplishments. I assure you have many roads and many goals to go in the next coming season as well as the next several years, as I relatively think you're a relatively young team. So congratulations on your effort and thank you for representing Bethlehem. And one of our last recognitions for this evening is about the academic side and some of the activities that happen for our students that sort of come out from volunteerism, dedication, and hard work, and just the perseverance of trying to do something new for our students. Tonight, I'd like to invite forward Anthony Malicia, who is doing an administrative internship for us this year at the high school and working with the administration, but he was also an individual who I approached earlier from a fellow classmate, Anthony Wilson, of working on a potential activity for our students in the area of law, and that's our mock trial. But Anthony, if you could come forward and do a little introduction, please.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. Good evening, Board of Education members, staff, community members. Thank you for allowing the opportunity to recognize the mock trial team. Actually, this year, Bethlehem was able to enter a team in the mock trial tournament for the first time since 2001, so it's been quite a while. Over the past few months, the team has been working hard preparing for the tournament, and it's paid off. They are advancing to the semifinal round and will face Cohoes, and they're going to represent the defense. It's important to note that of all 9 teams in the county, Bethlehem currently has the highest point total. After attending one of these trials, I was impressed at how professional and prepared our students were. This could not have been accomplished without the hard work and dedication of Judge Donovan and his team of attorneys, including Mr. Paul Gireller, Judge Richard McGuire, and Ms. Caitlin Promomo. We're fortunate to have the support of our community professionals and are very appreciative. I would encourage everyone to attend the semifinal trial on April 11th at 5:15 in the Albany County Family Court. And now I would like to invite Judge Donovan up so he can introduce the team.
This microphone's not going to work that well for me. Thank you very much, Anthony, for Dr. Douglas. Briefly, I've been coming to volunteer at the school for a couple of years, helping out with Mr. Wilson's AP class and their mock trial after the AP exam. And I was so impressed with the students that I discussed with Mr. Wilson possibly fielding a team for this year. I didn't even know we had a team in 2001. I'm also an alumni of the school. We never had a team when I was here. I met with Dr. Douglas and Mr. Landry here at the high school, and they gave us the green light, and I had a great response. We have an amazing group of students that work so hard, and the other teams had about a 6-week jump start on us before we got the problem and got our team together, so we were really on a shortened time schedule. But our team members represent school athletes here, scholar athletes, elected members of the student body, members of the Science Bowl, many members of the play. It's a very diverse group, and I can tell you personally, I was amazingly impressed by their hard work and their intelligence. This would not have been possible without Judge Rich McGuire, who volunteered last minute and has really been taking a lion's share of the work as far as the coaching, Paul Gireller, who's a trial attorney, and Caitlin Promomo, also a Bethlehem grad, who's also a recent Albany Law grad in her first year of practice. So the coaches have been tremendous. We have had these students working from 7 a.m. to 9:30 and 10 p.m. 2 nights a week since January 20th, and we are very happy to be moving on April 11th. So without further ado, I'll introduce our team. If you guys want to stand up. Actually, the superintendent would like you to come up. Connor Armbruster, James Barriere, Jeremy Falk, Noah Falk, Sajeev Kanwar, Jack Levine, Quinn McGuire should be here any second. Jamie McCormick, Kevin Risch, and Simone Roberts-Payne. We have, come on up here. And Judge Rich McGuire is also here, one of our coaches. 2 members couldn't be here tonight. That's Jack McGuire and Jordan Gross. But thank you for the opportunity. It's been great, and I'm very impressed with our students. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the things that drives education, and most importantly, drives what we do as a community. In one short year, these students have sort of grasped the concepts and moved forward to the highest levels of expectation. As any superintendent, I imagine their coaches would say at the same time, in just their first year of competition versus many teams that have regularly participated in the mock trial throughout. So I want to commend them for their efforts. And again, if you get a chance to go out and see them work in this setting at such a young age, you'll understand why these extra programs and these volunteer efforts are so important as we build more exciting things that happen in some of the very difficult times that we face throughout the past year. So thank you, Judge Donovan, all the attorneys that are with you, as well as the students. We look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you. Just on a couple other notes, Mr. Chad Van Brunt has been selected to participate in the Era of George Washington at the George Washington's Mount Vernon in Mount Vernon, Virginia, in July 7th through the 13th, 2013. The selection for this seminar was very competitive, and we want to congratulate Chad on his selection. Also, additionally, on March 14th, 2013, Mr. Michael Mitchell in his Lab School Spanish 4 class took time to communicate and using Skype and our technologies with an English class from Mexico City. And from what I heard, it was very informative and also a useful integration of the Spanish language and dialect. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the things is we cannot be doing any of these things without the community's support, and I'd like to thank the community for coming out and helping guide the district on March 12th. The vote totals are there for each of the propositions 1 and 2, and it's really not about the votes. It's about the community being engaged, and we are proud to say that through our exit surveys that a vast majority, roughly 93% of those surveys, felt that they were very well informed to make their decisions, whatever that decision is. And I know, I think I would speak on behalf of the board, that's really what it's all about, is community engagement, involvement for the hard work that everybody puts in, whether they're a board member or a community member, to make Bethlehem Central Bethlehem Central. And I want to thank you for at least coming out and participating, as well as being here and participating as we build our financial picture for the coming year with our budget discussions. So thank you again for everything that you do for us, as well as this community together. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my report for tonight.
Okay. Next, we have Board of Education report. So, somebody want to start?
Can I just start, just because I want to just comment on this, and I wasn't here at the last 2 meetings, and I did watch them online, and just as I was impressed tonight with the presentation of the students, I was also impressed with the last one on the middle school and high school science bowls, and I forget what else, but I think it's great that we do all of these things, and that, you know, our students are still doing well despite when we're talking about budgets and whatever. So I just really wanted to say that.
Since the last meeting, there's quite a few of us that went to the state conference that was held March 10th.
Well, it was kind of March 9th, 10th. Well, for me, it was all weekend.
In downtown Albany, and then on Monday, we were able to visit Senator Breslin and Assemblywoman Fahey. Again, they're very supportive of getting some restoration of the funds that we have seen cut in the governor's proposed budget, so we're hopeful there'll be some sort of restoration.
Yeah, I think 2 observations. One is that there are quite a few new legislators that are willing to stand up for what they believe in. I don't know how long that'll last, you know, how long the honeymoon will last, but, you know, really appreciate their efforts because they're really focusing on education. They see what has happened, and with Assemblywoman Fahey, she used to be an Albany school board member. Senator Kachik. I know she doesn't represent this area, but she does close by Voorheesville, and, well, actually, her district is quite large. She also was a board member, and so they have an understanding of the issues that are facing school districts and school boards, and I think that's really, really helpful. I don't know how effective they will be, but the fact that they're willing to do something and write to the governor and let them know how they feel, I think is remarkable. Another thing also, with Senator Breslin, a couple years ago, he said to me, "Oh, I thought this was a big issue, but nobody has said anything." And, you know, I was obviously saying something at the time, but what has happened this year is there has been a lot of community input. And I want to thank you for doing that, because, I mean, he'll look at me and he knows I'm going to say what I'm probably going to say, but he never knows exactly what somebody from the community might be saying. So anything that you can do and still do, whether phone calls, emails, letters, you know, to our representatives would still be helpful. They still haven't decided on the budget yet. We thought there'd be some news tonight, but there isn't. So anything you can continue to do would really be good.
Anyone else?
I know a number of us went to the band festival on Wednesday, where there were elementary school bands, middle school bands, and several high school bands. It was a wonderful time, fabulous music, good community turnout. I just want to commend Mr. Norman and the music faculty for all their work, as well as the custodial staff and the teachers who assisted by using alternate rooms. It was clearly a team event, a team effort, and it was wonderful, wonderful music for the musicians. Also, I participated in the middle school career day yesterday. I think there were over 50 parents participating from all our range of fields. We did about 6 rotations with different classes. I was representing arts and writing. And I'm not sure, is Mr. Klugman here? So I don't know if you heard about, I gave them a task of being your speechwriter at the end. And I set up a situation that resulted in a riot in your front parking lot. And I asked them to give you the opening line of your remarks to the crowd. And it was very creative with what they came up with. And I think the most creative one was, "Nobody panic, I have candy for everyone." So it was a great time, so. Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
Just one more thing. One part of the Capitol Conference was the advocacy part, but the other part was on safety, which sometimes we're not totally thinking about, but when we think of safety, we certainly want to create an environment in schools that children feel safe, and when they feel safe, they can learn better. And so the first part of the conference was on safety, and they had some outstanding speakers, like even from the FBI and Secret Service and, you know, then state police agencies. And they spoke more on profiles of the type of people that end up, you know, that you can be concerned about. And they've been able to, it's a little bit easier to profile students or people within buildings, but they haven't come up with the profile people outside. You know, so it's hard to judge what someone might do from the outside, whether it's from the, you know, the immediate community or greater community. So that's still a concern. And the other concern too is the bystander rule. They spent a day, well, this actually was NYSBA, spending a day at Schenectady High School interviewing staff and students and talking about safety and what concerns they have in their schools. And one of the items that came up was that the word snitch was used several times, and I know we have a lot of students in here, but if you hear something, it's very hard to be able to talk to somebody about it. So they're trying to create this environment so that students will talk to somebody about something and have students feel like, well, this is their school, so they don't want it blown up or anything like that, or they don't want to be bullied themselves, you know, in all areas. So it was really excellent. And then there was a professor from Harvard that spoke more on the mental issues regarding students and safety. And that also was, I don't want to go into too much detail, but that also was very interesting. And they're doing a lot of threat assessment studies, and there were a couple that were done by the Secret Service that maybe, if I give it to you, Tom, maybe somehow we can put some of those websites up on the links up on the website, But this also was done by the State School Board Association, tending to our youth on, providing effective support for sound minds and safe hearts. It's on the NYSBA website, so anybody really can have access to it. And it's really an excellent report, and just by chance, it was written by an employee there who also is a Bethlehem graduate. So really good job. So if you have a chance, it's NYSBA, nyssba.org. You'll check out the website for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, now we have our presentation, budget work session. Dr. Douglas, are you going to introduce?
Yes.
Kathy and Al?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight is roughly the fourth presentation of our budgetary program for the school district. As we start off every evening, we sort of give you a little recap as we go through for the budget development thus far, as well as we will transition and talk about tonight's topics of transportation as well as our special education services. And then at the end, we will have a little different twist because this concludes all of our programmatic areas that we will cover sort of in a synopsis sheet, the potential options that the board has to consider going forward. So we may have to break away a little, but we'll cover future meetings before we do that. As everything, the budget season, we were hoping to have a little bit of a change this evening because we were hopeful that we might have news that a budget deal or a budget accord had been reached. However, that has still not materialized. I think I would sort of reemphasize Ms. Lenhart's statement that the legislature is really looking and hearing from its public constituents. And I want to commend everybody that have heard our call to advocacy, as well as within the district and within the community for the calls by many different agencies that work with us. The reason why I say that is because that is what we are hearing. You are truly starting to have an impact that 4 years of consistent reductions to the state aid just here in Bethlehem alone will have its toll, and that people are starting to more or less mobilize and impact those decisions. And that's what's going on. And I think that's also a little of what's entering in to some of the rallying that we're seeing with our freshman legislators and assemblymen and assemblywomen, just because of the fact that they are coming right from the ground source where you are. I would hope to say that I would not predict a fifth straight year of this next year, but I predicted that last year. I'm not going to do it. So hopefully we'll see little sunlight like we saw today at the end of the road coming into election year next year. As we get started tonight, one of the things that we really want to be aware of is what are potential options. There have been no decisions made at this point. We developed a plan last year in the budget, and we ended up challenging the tax cap because we had such a significant deficit. We still have a deficit, but that also meets within the plan that we put forth last year, and we're trying to adhere to that plan as we take ourselves through the next couple of years and move ourselves off the reliance of our own funds or fund balance to support our budget. So these are some of the discussions, and who better to start off the recap than our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Judith Kehoe.
Thank you, Dr. Douglas. As Dr. Douglas mentioned, sadly, we have nothing new to report on state aid. So this is a very quick slide, the quickest one you'll see from me tonight. Because of no changes in state aid, that means that the preliminary gap numbers that we had presented to you at the last meeting is unchanged at just over $5 million. We have been talking in context of what would it take to potentially close that gap, and the options that we are considering are what is the amount of the tax levy that the board will ultimately approve, and that will then be part of the budget that goes out to the community on the vote on May 21st. If we were to go up to what is our calculation based on the governor's formula as part of the tax cap legislation, that sort of sets the parameters for defining how much money do we need to support our programs. And following that formula, that would mean that we could levy up to 3.75% and not require the supermajority vote of the 60% threshold. If we went to the 3.75%, that would yield about $2.2 million in additional revenues for the general fund. If we were to use $1,750,000 of our fund balance, those two elements combined would give us a gap to be closed of just over $1 million. And as we go through these weeks of discussions, we're considering what should be considered as a reduction, and of course, ever hopeful that we might see some additional revenues being restored to support the district's programs. This chart summarizes really the range of options that we need to consider as we go through the process. Were we to say that we don't want to go into our next budget year with a planned deficit where we're going in expecting a loss, where we're going to be drawing down on our fund balance, which is a finite resource, and we only want to cover this gap with a tax levy increase, that would be almost a 9% increase in the levy amount, which is not what we're proposing, but just so you have order of magnitude. This is important to note that this is an improvement from where we were last year. We've been talking about how we're trying to improve the fiscal position over a multi-year period. This was closer to 14% last year if we were going to close that entire gap with a tax levy amount. If we go to the 3.75%, that's what I had just covered on that previous slide, we're looking at about $1 million of reductions. Although we're showing various other scenarios, 3%, 2%, what really brings it into focus is if we were to go down to 0% increase on the tax levy, which is in fact where we would be going to if in fact the community did not support the budget, because one of the more onerous provisions on the tax cap legislation is that if your budget is not supported, you cannot raise your levy beyond last year's amount. So that would give us 0 in additional dollars available to us, and we could either choose to draw down a portion of that fund balance at perhaps the $1,750,000, which means that we would be looking at additional reductions of between close to $3.3 million or $5 million. And after 3 years of making very extensive cuts, it just becomes so much more incredibly difficult to find areas that can be reduced without causing very impactful effects to all of our district programs and operations. The next few slides are going to show you a quick recap of what the proposed reductions might look like going forward if we were at that maximum allowable tax levy limit of 3.75%. So each area is broken down for operations and maintenance. There were 2 elements proposed. The new capital outlay funding was a potential element that could be reduced for $100,000, and then we could also reduce the various expenditure lines for a total of about $194,000 in reductions. For athletics, we talked about the reduction in the sports from 4 levels down to 3 levels, and that would bring us up to approximately $264,000 in reductions. When Ms. Monroe presented at our last budget meeting, she identified close to another $858,000 in reductions. Again, we want to emphasize, as Dr. Douglas had said, any of the reductions that are listed on these worksheets are in no particular prioritized order. They're just up there so that we can look at a list of what types of elements we're considering. If we were to decide to go below the 3.75%, we have presented other areas. These are more impactful reductions, but for O&M, athletics, and then for instructional technology, we've identified close to $400,000 in additional reductions that could be taken. On the instructional side, close to $1 million in additional reductions if we don't get restoration in aid or we decide to go lower on that tax levy. Okay. Before I turn it over to our Director of Transportation, Al Karam, I'm just going to start and give a very quick overview on the budget. I feel like I've been talking transportation with the board and the community for a good long time now, because we started with an update back at our October meeting, where we were talking about the impacts from the fairly dramatic changes that had been made in the routing and in the bus stop pickup configurations for all of the students. The totals for the 12-13 year of $6,042,000 are what was in the adopted budget, but in fact, we will be expecting to come in significantly below this number. Just the salary savings alone were close to $700,000 based on these changes. So again, as you're looking at the number for 12-13, it's actually going to come in lower. The numbers going into 13-14 are slightly higher, and those are based on the terms of the contracts. All of the other areas within the budget are relatively flat. So the budget that is being proposed is at close to $5.5 million in total. And at this point, I'm going to turn it, oh, Charmaine has a question.
Before Mr. Karam comes up, can I ask you a couple of questions about those general slides that you just went over?
Go backwards?
Yes, please.
Okay.
On the range of reduction slide, needed to, with varying tax level.
one?
Yes. Could you just remind me again, how many dollars go into, for example, a 0.5 reduction from, anytime you go down, for example, 0.5 in the tax levy, what does that equal in terms of number of dollars?
0.5% is roughly $300,000.
Thank you.
Okay, so each 1/4% would be $150,000. So again, we didn't want to show 60 lines of permutations
right.
here, but just so you have that general rule of thumb.
I just also wanted to make a comment on the one that other potential reductions if below maximum allowable tax levy. It's that one, I think. No, it's before that one. The one that talks about sports, reduce sports from
4
3
to 3?
levels to 2 levels, or just in terms of the reduction of the sports. I have just run into different parents from different other districts and mentioned Mr. DeMayo's recommendation, should we need to make some cuts, and have found, I was interested to see which level other districts had cut. And across the board, people have said the freshman sports are the ones that went. So I just want to kind of confirm what Mr. DeMayo was saying. And let's see. The instruction FTE by building, I noticed that these were all at the high school and the middle school. The next slide, the other potential reductions for the program. If below maximal, I think it's go another one, I believe. That one. There's one that talks about mostly elementary schools, instruction FTE.
It's for the,
That one.
Here,
I just
yes.
noticed that most of those cuts would be at the elementary level. So I just wanted to flag that for the board, that there are, even though there are potential cuts up for the middle school and high school, once we get to prioritizing that, I just made a mental note that those were all cuts to elementary. That's all.
okay, thank you.
Judy, I have a question now. Back at the, one of the beginning slides, the expenditures of $90 million that you had listed.
Yes.
How much of that is how much of an increase? Because I know there are a couple of little increases that have been proposed over the last couple of weeks. How much of that is an increase from last year's?
Percentage-wise, budget to budget was just over 2%, I want to say. It was 2.38. But you're talking about just new additions?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that I
not-
don't have
yes.
broken out as a percentage, but that we will.
Not a percentage, but how many dollars?
And we have that, so for instance, in the special education slides, there were some changes in there. I think we had covered some in the
Yeah, that's what I mean.
instructional
What is the
slides.
total of additions that you have included in there?
I'll have
from
to do a quick
last-
tally while Mr. Karam is presenting, and I'll get you that
Okay,
number.
because I'm just curious, what's a real budget to budget? What would be the real budget to budget? Okay, thanks.
Anyway, I have one more question about the first transportation slide that you just reviewed, actually, for him.
I'm getting dizzy. You're going backwards and
I know,
forwards.
well, sorry.
Keep you in.
Right here.
That one.
Okay.
You said that for 2012 and 13, there was a $6 million budgeted, but there were some savings because of the consolidation of routes. Could you
Yes.
just clarify for the community, where did the savings go?
Where do those savings go? They remain unexpended money. So we talked about how the $1,750,000 is the amount that we expected to draw down on our fund balance. That number is reduced by those savings. So we basically use less of our savings.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, now I will turn it over to Mr. Karam, our director.
Good evening, everyone.
I think she said it was.
Before I comment on the next slide and subsequent slides, let me just give a quick overview. The number of buses we currently have in the fleet is down to 124 buses, 85 large, 39 small to medium. Total number of employees, including supervisors, 156, and they're broken down to 113 drivers, 30 bus attendants, 7 mechanics, and 6 office staffs. We have a total of 88 routes. The last time we were at this number was back in the 2003-2004 school year. Back then we had 84 routes and 119 buses. So we continue within the guidelines, policies, laws, and regulations that govern school transportation to provide safe and efficient transportation system to our student and district. And we also continue to provide our staff with their mandated safety refreshers, which is 2 per year. And we've also offered our staff, and they've responded pretty good with numbers, to attend non-paid safety meetings, which I think is pretty good of them to do. So besides our primary mission of providing school transportation from home to school, school to home, we also provide other services that integrate with and hopefully help reduce the workload of our colleagues outside the transportation department. We also provide opportunities for students outside the regular educational program. And example of these services, one I refer to as the IEP, transportation-related service analysis. This analysis is done by my capable assistant director, Cindy Jerowitz. It is based on detailed interviews with the bus driver, bus attendant team relative to the needs of the students with IEPs. We then forward this analysis to SCSS to help the staff determine the level of transportation services that may or may not be needed for the following school year. And we believe this effort helps reduce the time required and takes out the guesswork when the CSCs are conducting their annual IEP reviews. We've streamlined our student discipline processes. We've put in place a process which help our employees deal with negative student behavior on the school bus. Part of that process is that for every request from a driver to file a bus referral, that driver must then follow our outline process. And as part of this process, we keep the student's principal advised of actions taken by our drivers so that when that referral is filed, the principals will know that all methods have been tried, and we believe this process cuts down on the administrative time that the principal spends on these types of issues. We also provide apprenticeship, mentoring, and school-to-work experience. We currently have 2 regular ed students who are involved in our apprenticeship program. We have 2 students with special needs who are assigned under the school-to-work program, and we've also provided opportunities for students, for one reason or another, to conduct community-type service. Another positive that I want to share with the board and the community is the disposal of all old school buses. Previously, as you know, we used to either trade them in or sell them doing a local bid. We have since this year switched to selling buses on the publicsurplus.com website, and we've had a really successful return on that. We've actually, the buses that we just sold, we'll be bringing back a little bit over $110,000 instead of the typical 15 to about 30,000 that we were getting on trade-ins. So this has been a really successful program for us. Although you're Your transportation department has taken hits like everybody else through the budget process over the past several years. We continue to find ways to cope and provide the quality and safe service which our students and parents have come to expect from us. Again, to give you a comparison between last school year and now, we've reduced the size of our fleet from 143 buses in 2011, 2012 to 124 for the current school year. In 11-12, we had 111 routes. This year, we have 88, 143 buses to 124. Our spare fleet, which is based on our highest needs, and that's typically in the afternoon needs, we have 36 buses in the spare fleet, 28 large and 8 small. These spare buses support our preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, and DOT inspections, and they also support our regular routes, overflow bus needs that support the regular routes, and field and sports trips. The average age of our school buses have been climbing upwards the past 3 years. The current average for the past 3 years is at 6.2 years old. The average from 2000 to 2010 was 5 years old. We have changed our replacement plan from 10 years for the large buses, 7 for the small, to 12 years for the large and 9 for the small. So instead of a 10% replacement for the buses every year, we're down to 8%. That's what it should be anyway, theoretically. So the buses that we're proposing to replace will be 13 years old plus by the time they're replaced. They're currently 12, if the bus proposition is adopted and it passes. Newer technologies and better maintenance has allowed us to run a cleaner fleet relative to emissions and other items which enhance student safety. However, we got to remember that we have 62 buses that are 2000 or older, that were built in 2000 or older. These buses had already gone through several winters up here in the Northeast without the benefit of the brand new bus wash that we got in 2007. So we still find that rust to be our #1 enemy and the main cause for replacing these buses. There are obviously other reasons that we want to replace, which I've shared with Judy in detail. I can just briefly say that they deal with safety, budgets, bus resale price, and of course, the biggest one of them all is the cost of maintenance. It costs us 42% more from year 6 through 10 than it does from year 1 through 5 on the maintenance side of the house. The buses, at the end of the 5 years, the warranty is over with, and then everything comes out of district pocket. We did start with 83 routes at the beginning of the school year. However, we had to add 5 more through the fall and winter due to the overcrowding and timing issues that we experienced. And I do want to recognize, I do see some of my colleagues out here in the audience. I want to say that we have the best trained and the most conscientious group of employees you could find anywhere. And it's really my distinct pleasure to be allowed to lead them day in and day out. These guys deserve a lot of accolades because they do perform a difficult job under very difficult conditions day in and day out. And I know to the board, you have a difficult job ahead of you as well as administration of deciding on the budget. Rest assured that we in transportation will continue to work hard on finding ways, as we have demonstrated over and over, to be even more efficient. So thank you for allowing me this time to share just a small picture of what we do for our students and for the district as a whole. So let me move on now to that slide. So as you see in front of you, the breakdown of our department in terms of employees and what the costs are for salaries. It's important to note that not only do we have to certify and take care of our contracted employees, but we have to do the same thing for our substitutes as well. We do drug tests, 50% of our employees every school year, and 10% of them also get alcohol tested. We have to maintain our certifications, such as behind the wheel, defensive driving, and written tests that they have to undertake on a yearly basis. As an example, our trainer, just in the month of February, did 91 of these types of certifications or recertifications. On the mechanic side of the house, although we dropped our fleet from 143 to 124, we're still running an above average ratio of buses to mechanics. Used to be 21 to 1, we're down to 18 to 1. And speaking of volume, our payroll department just last month handled 288 time cards, which they processed. They had to verify on average 2,500 hours of extra work, processed 118 invoices. On the routing side, 730 items had to be processed, all related to routing in one way, shape, or form. Dispatch office, 760 phone calls, plus 50 field trips that they dealt with. On the revenue side of the house, again, I just would like to bring your attention back to the sale of the buses at $115,000. For 13-14, we got, if we are allowed to purchase 6 new buses, we will replace 1 for 1. That means we will auction off 6 more buses. Although I have 15,000 up there, we're hoping that we will get the average of what we got this year, which is about 6,000 per bus. On this slide here, when you take a look at it, it may not make sense to most of you, but just think of this as an air carrier or your doctor's office where they overbook just so they can get the volume in and make sure that, you know, all the seats are filled and all the hour blocks are have a warm body in them. And that's exactly what we did here. The difference between 11-12 and 12-13, we looked at our ridership, our daily ridership. We took all our routes apart. We got rid of all the bus stops that were on our mapping system and started fresh again. Consolidated bus stops, backed more kids on the buses in the routing database to get more riders on those school buses. Some of the other impacts, as you know, a little bit longer ride times for some of the students, and I'm going to show you another slide that will give you a better idea of those numbers. More students assigned to stops, students having to walk further, bus seating at times, it is tight, especially when you have a full load of bus. And there are some days, especially Mondays and Fridays, when there's no late school or no late programs, we have to send a couple of overflow buses to the high school and a couple to the middle school. Actually, it's the same 2 buses servicing both program levels. We did lose the fleet maintenance supervisor or head mechanic, but we've absorbed those duties between the 3 of us, although most of the duties I'm taking care of, and that's only because my experiences and skills that I've acquired in the military lend themselves to taking care of the maintenance side of the house, whereas Cindy has taken over some of my other duties on the administrative side of the house. Again, some of the impacts. We did eliminate 3 floating sub-positions. That's really has worked well. There's no issues for us at the department. The private parochial distance was changed from 16 miles to 15 miles for eligibility, which brought it back to what the state says it ought to be. That only affected 1 school and really no huge impact on the savings. The reduction in the B-team program, while I would have liked for that to have stayed, at least we are able to continue to use that program for the incoming kindergartners. And again, I mentioned the staff training. We are doing the 2 mandated plus non-paid safety meetings. Here's the comparative ride times. While we did increase the average ride time up to 60 minutes, the majority of the students are under 35 minutes or less. So, Judy, you want to take that?
Sure.
Now, unless the board has any questions on anything that...
I just want to clarify, I know you lost the head mechanic, the head mechanic last year, and I want to make sure I understand the ratio. You said, are you currently 21 mechanics to one bus, or I'm sorry, no, wrong way. 21 buses to one mechanic, or 18 buses to one mechanic?
We're currently 18 because we reduced the fleet.
The
We
fleet.
were at 21 to 1.
Okay, and do you have any idea of what the state is there any general recommendation of how many
The-
buses should be per mechanic?
Yes, the general recommendation is about 13 to 1, and that's about the average in the capital region. The state, they used to have it, but like 3-4 years ago, when things changed, the fiscal picture changed, they took that off their website, so they leave it up to the school districts.
Okay, and the apprenticeships that you spoke of, how many hours do the students work? Are they paid, and what types of responsibilities do they do?
They're not paid. They come down, they spend time, we track their time. We report, if there's a need for that, we report their time back to guidance counselors or whoever's in charge of them. And typically, they're down for one period per day. And they do things like seat repairs, tire dismounting, mounting, just you know, if they have what it takes, we allow them under supervision to work with a mechanic, taking wheels apart and brake systems and putting them back together.
Okay. But the mechanic is overseeing that?
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
They're not on their own, trust me.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Al, I have a couple questions.
Yes.
If you could go back to the transportation salary and position information slide. That one, yep. Now, the 1213 to 1314 for drivers and monitors have both gone down. And you have the number of employees, and I doubt they're being paid less. So is that number of employees for the 1213 year or the 1314 year? And is that a reduction in the number of people or the hours, or what's going down, and what that number of employees, what does that relate to?
Judy, you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that one. The number of employees relates to the employees that are included in the 13-14 budget.
1314.
So Al was referencing the numbers that he had in place last year. These numbers are lower. The dollar figures in the 1213 column, remember, are higher because they don't reflect the higher amount of savings that were actually realized based on this rerouting. We had an
'cause this is
estimate,
just
and it was
budget, this
very low.
isn't
So
actual.
this is budget, original budget, not projected actual. The projected actual salary numbers for 1213 are going to come in closer to $4.1 million.
Okay, so it really is going to be a slight increase
Yes,
this year?
yes,
Which
as
is
I
what
had-
you would
yes.
expect?
Yes.
But, okay, it might be helpful if we could see those, even if it's projected, kind of your projection
Mm-hmm.
for what the 12-13 year would look like, because that sounds like that's much more realistic than this budget figure.
Right, and that's why I had highlighted that, because it does look odd that there's such a
Yeah.
significant decrease, and that's, but it's not often I get asked to add a third column of numbers, so I'll be delighted to get to that.
Well, and then that kind of relates to what I wanted to ask about that savings in addition. Last year, you did budget a certain amount. Then you realized that in the fall, we were going to project this big savings. What did you do wrong? I mean, what was budgeted? Was it, you thought you wouldn't be able to reduce the routes as much? You thought, I mean, where was the difference? Or did you think it would, more drivers would be able to cover more routes? Or where were the differences from what you budgeted to what you actually did in September? Does that make sense?
What we ended up doing was, and we really couldn't give you a number that is close to what we're actually seeing now, simply because until we put this entire routing scheme together, it's really difficult to figure out exactly how many routes you're going to need.
Right,
To
so-
figure out how many stops, all that put together. Well, once we put it together and we ran it, and then adjusted it by the 5 routes, because remember, we started at 83, and now we're at 88.
Yeah.
Then we knew, okay, it's stable, this is what it's going to be, this is what it's going to cost, and this is what we're going to be able to save.
So from the budget time last March till the summer when you actually ran it, basically the change is that it was, you could even reduce the routes more than you thought during the budget time?
Yes,
That's all
ma'am.
I'm just trying to figure out.
Absolutely. yeah.
Okay.
So,
So
and we
is
did
it-
reduce by 24 routes, which is a huge amount.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get it. I
Yeah.
just wondered what the difference was between those two. Okay.
And part of that, remember with the increase in the maximum ride time up to the 60
Right.
minutes, you could also, that helped you with your capacity numbers. So by
Right.
putting more students on the bus and allowing the longer ride times, combined with the restructuring of the stops, it really enabled you to reduce those routes.
Now, and then last fall, when you came to us and gave us kind of a status report, you said you were concerned in the winter with heavy coats and all those kinds of things that you might need to increase a route or two, and I'm just wondering, did you have to do it at that time of the year as well, or was it all just in the fall when you were seeing how things worked out?
All the additions happened between September and December.
Okay, so the winter worked out all right? Okay. And there was one last question. So we are expecting a slight reduction in enrollment for next year. I would assume it's not enough that it's really going to make much difference. I assume you've kind of projected here to have the same basic routes that you did this year?
That's exactly right. We'll continue to have the basic routing scheme that we roll over into next year. 100 kids, 150 kids, if they're spread throughout the district,
Right.
again,
Doesn't-
won't have that
right.
huge of an impact
Right,
on the routes.
Right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Back on that same transportation salary position, I just had a question on the dispatcher trainer line, because that was a sizable jump from 112,000 to whatever, to 137,000. And I guess I just wondered, especially when other things seem to be going down, why that is going up so much.
Yeah. I'll verify that, but I don't believe that halftime position was included in that line in the prior year. I think it was included under the extra help line on the bottom. But I'll verify that for you.
Okay,
and
so
get
there's
back to you.
extra time
It's just a
included.
reclassification.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other members? I do have a question, too. On that same slide, I think you still have it up there, substitutes and overtime. Do you know the breakout of that? I mean, you may not, like the amount that we paid in overtime and the amount we paid in substitutes. I guess the reason I'm asking is we don't have the floater subs. Would it have been better to have that than all the overtime?
Go ahead.
Microphone, John.
That particular area is broken through regular runs, sport runs, it could be substitutes and overtime in a wide variety. I could give to you, or I could give to the board, a list of our year-to-date, and you'd be able to see what they are. For instance, substitutes, year-to-date salaries are $159,000 as of the end of February. There's other substitutes that are temporary substitutes before we go through our regular bid sessions in January, where those substitutes could have run from the new routes that were in place for that whole period. So there's multiple areas that substitute and that additional dollars come from.
Yeah, I
Every
think
facet of transportation, sports runs, field trips, that type of thing.
they're tracking it at a much greater level of detail than what we've shown on here. But what I can get for you is just a summary to break it out between the substitute amounts for the 12-13 budget, showing the projected actual as well, compared to what's in there for 13-14, and then breaking it out by the overtime.
I just want to make sure we didn't hurt ourselves when we cut out the floating substitutes.
Yeah, no.
Right, no.
I would say no.
I also have to say, you guys have done a phenomenal job this year with all the changes, and I know September was a real hard month with probably, I don't know how many phone calls that you had, but you
Well,
guys did a great
we
job.
appreciate your support, and we appreciate the board and administration giving us the tools to do our job with. Thank you very much.
Do you have any drivers here?
Yes, stand up, stand up.
Which is wonderful to see, because they're going to be at work tomorrow at about 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah, no, I mean, really remarkable job.
Yeah, I also want to mention that safety conference that I attended from NISBA. Al was also there, realizing, I think, the importance, not just of the vehicles, on the outside, the body of the vehicles, but also the climate inside the bus for students.
Absolutely.
It makes a big difference. So thank you for giving up a Saturday.
Not a problem. Enjoyed it.
So go forward in the slides again to the reductions, if we're at hotel. Keep going. Right there. You want to just talk about the two $25,000 reductions that you offered?
Yeah, we offered $25,000 reduction in off-site bus repairs and $25,000 in parts and supplies for next year. Will they have an impact? I don't know. We're going to do our level best to work with what's given us, and you know, I promise you our buses will continue to be safe.
Can I ask you a question about the off-site repairs? I thought those were the kind of repairs that you would send out if you weren't able to do them in-house, or was it more of a timing thing?
Things that we can do and things because it is timing.
Okay.
Yes.
So it's a combination.
It's a combination.
Thank you.
Okay. And next slide.
Okay, as you know, we currently don't have the Monday, Friday late buses, so another thing that we would put out there would be the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday late buses, which would give us approximately $50,000 in savings, and maybe again look at increasing the ride time up to 75 minutes, which would net you an additional 47 or thereabouts.
And of course, that impacts quite a few students, which is why, if you recall from last year, those were very much at the bottom of the list of reductions.
It would be both, what, for after-school help?
Right.
After-school activities?
Which is just a critical time for
Sports.
so many students, so.
Well, I think on the chart provided, there's 33 kids with 56 minutes or so. It's kind of hard to read, but it's up there somewhere. Do you have any idea how many students the 75-minute ride might affect? I know you haven't done the routing, but.
It would be again on the fringes of the district, not so much those that live in the more heavily populated part of the district.
The late buses, if you were to eliminate the late buses, how would that impact the private schools?
It would not.
Would not.
Right.
But you would.
Because we have to do that regardless.
Right. So you
And
would
we
still-
would use the same amount of buses we're currently using on Monday, Friday, when we don't have the late bus service for our students.
Okay.
And then the bus replacement, you touched on a lot of that before, so,
We talked about some of these items already for the bus replacement. Again, we're not looking to add to the fleet. We're not looking to purchase more buses. We're looking on maintaining a bus replacement plan so that we can maintain a safe and reliable fleet. It stabilizes our operating and debt service costs, meets the latest safety, EPA, fuel efficiency standards, and it helps us keep our out-of-service rates down relative to the Department of Transportation inspections, which we undergo every week, 6 buses at a whack every 6 months. Here's some data on the bus purchase from 2003-4 to now. You can see where it was relatively a steady 14-15, and then 06-07, that proposition was defeated. We went back to 15, had to make up some of those losses in the subsequent years, back down to 15, and now we're at last 2 years at 6 buses each. And there's really a danger to this. We should be actually replacing right now 8% of the fleet, which would be 10 buses. If we keep keeping it artificially low, it's going to push into a bubble down the road, both in terms of buses that will age out 14, 15, 16 years, which, you know, we can lose them at any time. DOT inspections are pretty tough. Also, you will start looking at a seesaw ride for bus replacements. And really unpredictability in the operational status of these buses, whether they're going to be available to you or not, especially as they begin to get up there in the years.
Judy, do you have the dollar amount that's associated with that? Because I know some of those are large buses, big buses. The dollar amount that's been over?
I have the dollar amounts that go back to 9-10. I'd have to pull the others. Back in 9-10, there were 18 buses at 1.2 million. In 10-11, the 15 buses, and there must have been a larger mix of the large buses because that total was $1.408 million. And then in 11-12, we had 6 large and small buses at 375. I can get this into a chart for you if that's easier. I see you taking copious notes. Where we break it out based on large and small vehicles and what those totals were. Part of what the board will be considering is whether or not to approve this recommended replacement of the 6 large buses. It would be for $639,000. And because any capital expenditure is required to be approved by the voters, this would need to be part of our legal notice that the board would adopt, and it would include then the $639 for 6 buses. We try to do this on a cost-neutral basis, where by evening out those purchases over the years and by factoring in the state aid that comes to us amortized over that 5-year period, we can really add some stability to the overall budget with this type of a purchase plan. Okay. Mike?
Judy, do you have any sense of what the difference is with the repair costs by keeping our bus purchases so artificially low right now?
Do you want to?
As I stated earlier, the difference in the maintenance cost goes up 42% on average between the first 5 years and the second 5 years and subsequent. That's one element we have to keep in mind. The second element is that if the cost of repairs exceed 30% of the value of the bus at that 10-year mark, you really should be getting rid of it and replacing it. And right now, in some cases, on these 11, 12, 13-year-old buses, you're looking at 50 to 71% increase. So the average bus right now, a new bus under warranty, parts and labor per year, it's around $3,500 versus $4,500, $5,500. In some cases, $6,000 on an older bus.
Okay. That concludes the transportation section of the presentation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Kathy Johnston, our Director of Special Ed and Student Services.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank Dr. Douglas for putting me on the night that the tallest people that I know have shown up for a meeting. I did wear my big girl shoes, but I don't think I could go near the height of any of those people. So, all right, let me start with, what did you hit here, Al? This one? Yeah. Okay. All right, in talking about our special education program, I really wanted to start with giving you an overview of who our students are and what services we are offering here at Bethlehem. This first chart is a listing of students. The blue represents students with IEPs, individual education plans, and that light green, which probably is a little hard to see on the top of that, is students with 504 plans. We've broken it out to the first bar graph is the elementary students. So we have roughly about 300 students at the elementary level receiving services. At the middle school level, you can see that as students work on their IEP goals and they achieve them, they begin to have less services. We have roughly 176 students at the middle school level. where it's 150 with IEPs, and the amount of 504 plans increases a little bit. And then at the high school level, you'll see that, again, students are achieving their goals. There are less students at the high school receiving these services, so about 100 students with IEPs and about 50 with 504 plans. The last two marks are for students that are out of district that we are required to provide services for, and then parentally placed students that we have to also have services for. This is a more detailed breakdown of our students by the 7 buildings in the district, the out-of-district students that we're providing services to, the parentally placed students, and then that last column is our preschool students. Just as a reminder, we do have a preschool chair. We do run meetings for preschool services, but the services and the funding for those students comes through the county. So all told, we are providing services or overseeing services for 707 students. This arrow represents our continuum of services. We operate everything on what we would call a least restrictive to most restrictive arrow. So the portion on the left is related services. That allows our students, this is at the elementary level I'm showing you first. Those are things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, physical therapy. Moving a little further to the more restrictive side, we have consultant teacher services, so special education teachers working with students. We provide resource room programs, so students leave their classroom and go to a specific resource room for support. At the elementary level, we have a co-teach program, K-5, where there is a special ed teacher working with a regular ed teacher and a paraprofessional. We have skills classes. At the elementary level, we have 3 of those. We have a K-1 class and a 2-3 class that are located at Hammergrail Elementary School. And then we have a 4-5 class that's located at Glenmont Elementary School. We also have intensive skills classes for students with greater needs. We have 2 of those, a K-2 program and a 3-5 program, and those are located at Ellesmere Elementary School. And then the last or most restrictive part of our continuum here is students that are placed out of district. And at the elementary level, we have 6 students that are out of district. This looks like the same chart. This is for our secondary programs, our middle school and our high school. And much of it is the same as at the elementary level. So we have all of the related services I mentioned: speech, OT, PT, teacher of the visually impaired, teacher of the hearing impaired. We have resource room programs at both the middle school and the high school. In the elementary level, we talked about a co-teach program. Here at secondary, we are moving to something called a direct consultant teacher model, 6th through 12th grade. And that's a little bit of a change for next year. And we've done a little bit of a consolidation, which I'll talk about in a minute. At the middle school, I apologize, we have our skills program. That's a grades 6 through 8. Then we have our intensive skills program, grades 6 through 8. Then switching up to the high school, we have what we call our LEAD program, which is Linking Education and Development, and that's for grades 9 through 12. And then our out-of-district placements. We currently, between the middle school and the high school age range, we have 26 students placed out of district. Before I get on to the budget portions, I just wanted to touch very briefly on the fact that there's new diploma requirements for students with special needs. And we've talked about this at previous meetings, and the only piece I really wanted to remind people of as we're discussing budget tonight is that basically now we have students that will be alternate assessment, or the rest of our students that need to get a Regents diploma. The state has provided us with something called SAC, which is the Skills and Achievement Commensurate. But what we're finding is that it's very challenging for some of our students to try to make it through the rigor of Regents courses. And for some of our students, they are not able to take a full load of classwork. So what it looks like it will do is that they will not be able to graduate in the normal 4 years. And so not only does that have us giving more time to the students, but it's not good for them not being able to graduate with their peers and their self-esteem. So it's something, this is the first year of this, something that we want to really monitor and look at closely. So here, these slides look like the slides you've seen for all of the other budget presentations. Our beginning slide is our overview of our special education services. And I want to note that in the 12-13 year, you'll see a little asterisk there. Our original budget increased by $343,000 due to reclassification. So that actual number looked more like $8,983,000, so closer to where we are in the 13-14.
Right, and that was, if I can add a note of explanation, that was, we had made a reduction of 25 aides to students with disability last year, and that total amount was about $865,000. And when we went in and had applied that reduction, that total included both salaries and fringes, and inadvertently, the entire amount was posted into the salary line. So as we were reviewing the actual to budget, as is our custom, we said something's wrong here. We dug a little bit deeper and realized what had happened on that. So we made a reclassification where if you look to the adjusted budget for the special education department, it's actually higher, up to the $8.9 million, more in line with what you would expect to see as what we've looked at with the other numbers. We increased that line item, and then we made a corresponding decrease in the fringe benefits, which is where it should have been taken from in the first place.
Okay. In our health services, you'll see that there was an increase in there, and that was a contractual increase for our nursing staff. The next line is our psychological services, and you'll see a decrease in that line item, and that was due to breakage. Social work is about flat, and our totals for the 13-14 budgeted year is $10,855,000. So these are our expenditures by type. Our first line item is salaries at about $8 million. The next line item is the tuition paid to other schools, and you'll see that there's quite an increase in that line item of about $230,000. That has to do with the students that we send out of district for whom we do not have an appropriate program in district. And again, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Our BOCES services, and again, we have students that go out to a BOCES program, both Cap Region and Questar. And we also have some services that maybe only 1 or 2 students in district need, like teacher of the visually impaired or hearing impaired, and we use BOCES for those services as well. Our other operating costs and supplies has reduced. So we go back to that $10,855,000 for a total. Like you've seen with the other presentations, the other 4 large presentations that have been done, this slide represents our specific salary and positions. We start with our special education teachers. We are budgeting 36 teachers for the 13-14 school year. You'll see that that is a reduction. It's $2,445,000. I want to note here that we currently have 39 special education teachers. That budget line is showing 3 people less for next year. That's due to folks retiring and us not filling those positions so that we could try to work with the budget. We looked at those positions early on. We have 12 speech therapists at a salary amount of $857,000. Our aides to students with disabilities, we are down to 89 employees there at $2 million. And you'll see 2 asterisks there. Judy referenced this when we did that very first slide. It looks like we've gone up significantly there, but that was because of the, as Judy had mentioned, the fringe costs that didn't go in there. So the actual amount, Jude, was,
$2,087,000.
okay. So it's down a bit for the budgeted year. The next line item is myself and the 3 CSE chairs. There's an asterisk there because I wanted folks to note that some of that money comes out of our federal grant. We have 6 OTPTs, 4 occupational therapists and 2 physical therapists, and that line item is relatively flat, as is the clerical staff for our entire department. So the grand totals there are $6,368,000. And continuing on with the salaries and the positions, we currently have 12 nurses. One of them is paid out of the grant. It would be important for folks to note that there are a few nurses that work specifically with students, and then each of the elementary schools has a nurse, and there's 2 at the middle school and high school. There are a few, 1.5 clerical staff to support those nurses. 7 psychologists, as we referenced before, and that amount of salary for 13-14 is down due to the breakage of a psychologist. Social workers are 8, that's relatively flat. And as is, you've seen in other budget presentations, our substitutes, extra help, and overtime, that is going up by $10,000. I know Jody mentioned this 2 weeks back in her presentation, but given all of the new Common Core, RTI, APPR, there's been a significant amount of trainings that have gone on, and so we needed to really have extra money in that line item for substitutes. So that total is $1,642,000. So these are reductions. I tried to reference these earlier, but these are reductions that already went into the budget, which is why there's not an exact dollar amount next to it. So we knew this year, as we were working our way through the year, that 3 special ed staff would not be returning next year. So we budgeted not to have those folks back in for the 13-14 school year. We made a change to our co-teach program at the middle school. We currently have 5 sections of co-teach. Next year, we will be doing a direct consultant teacher model, and there'll be a section at 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade. So it will move from 5 sections to 3, and so there was the reduction of 2 aides that had been involved with that program. This slide, as you've seen for others, represents cuts if we needed to go below the maximum allowable tax levy. And what we looked to was an additional special education teacher, and then 2 aides to students with disabilities, and then the costs of those. I know the board has asked, we talked about this in the fall, and certainly the community wanted to know the impacts of these previous reductions. So I laid out for everyone what's happened in our department over the course of the last 3 years. We have had a reduction of 10 special education teachers over the last 3 years, 2 speech-language pathologists, a nurse, 3 behavior specialists, a social worker, and 37 aides to students with disabilities. It's a total of 54 staff people over the last 3 years. What we've done is continue to try to provide high-quality services. There's been a lot of consolidation, but it certainly has had a pretty significant impact. The other reductions that have had an impact are, we obviously have larger class sizes. Majority of our students with special needs are receiving their education in a general ed environment. And as Jody mentioned 2 weeks ago, all of our class sizes have increased significantly. There was a time, back in our heyday where we would try, for example, with a co-teach class, to keep the numbers of general ed students a bit smaller to make the ratios of staff to students a little larger. And that just hasn't been possible at all over the last few years. So, and our skills classes or resource rooms, we've really moved to the maximum that we're allowed to have. So everything has increased. We've had a relocation, I talked about the loss of those 54 bodies in special education, but we've also had to relocate teachers based on certification and where we needed people after the reductions had occurred. We certainly found over the last few years that a lot of our younger staff who were lower on the seniority list were at the middle school. So there's been a tremendous amount of movement in that building. So that's had an effect on all of our staff. In October of this year, Jody presented on the performance on state assessments. And I have to say there's been a significant decline in our test scores for grades 3 through 8, with the majority of the decline being at the middle school. And then the final piece of this is reductions combined with the addition of the new Common Core, APPR, and RTI has put a lot of great stress on the staff in general. So I'd like to open it up to see if folks have questions.
Yeah, I have a question if I can. I'm just a bit confused when, at our last meeting, Jody was presenting a reduction in the social worker, but it doesn't seem to show up on your budget. So is it still there, or is it different? I don't know.
The reason that was presented last week was because that social workers also serve general education students.
Right.
And so this proposal was in relation to that, which is why it was in the general education presentation.
But shouldn't it show up on her line item with the number of staff?
But-
You said your social work line is saying basically
But
flat.
that reduction hasn't been taken yet. That was a proposal in the first set of
And Laura,
reductions.
quite honestly, we thought
Got
if
it.
we put it in here, it would seem like it was 2 people, and that's not the intention.
Okay, so, but it is somebody that is in your
Yes, it
department,
is.
actually? Okay,
Yes.
okay. Just confused, sorry.
And can I just clarify, that was at the elementary level?
No,
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 no.
it's between .5
middle
half
school.
middle school and high
Okay, so
school.
I'm missing out all the social worker reductions, okay.
That was
Um,
2 weeks ago.
Yeah, sorry.
Do you want me to go back to show you that, it says .5 middle
You're
school.
right, it does. It's fine, you don't need.
Okay.
Goes further back, right?
To the very beginning.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Do you want me to go back,
No, it's
Charmaine?
okay.
Okay.
No. I had a question. Could you tell, the number of students out of district placement for this year is 32.
Correct.
Do you know how that compares to the previous couple of years?
Yeah, we track that pretty closely, Charmaine. The chairs and I talk about that almost weekly, actually. It's fairly level over the last, it's been between 30 and 34 over the last 3 to 4 years.
And you mentioned the preschool services, so they're covered by the county. The total cost of that covered by the county?
Yes.
The preschool service? And what type of services do you provide it for preschoolers, just out of curiosity?
Preschool students, remember that blue arrow I showed you?
Yeah.
That exists for them as well. So there are students that get related services, and that could be in their home or at a daycare or preschool that they go to. There's what they call integrated programs. They have half-day and full-day, so that's similar to our co-teach. There's skills classes, so they have that full continuum of services as well.
On the expenditure by type slide, where you have the increase in tuition paid to other schools, and it was about a $230,000 increase, I assume that's a combination of the number of school students in placement plus tuition increases, is that?
You know what, I'm sorry, can you say that
Sure.
again?
On the expenditure by type slide, the increase in the tuition paid to other schools, is that a combination of costs related to the increase in number of students there and the increase in tuition charged, or?
It's really, the number of students hasn't gone up as I mentioned to you, it's been between 30 and 34.
Okay.
We're at 32 this year. It happens to be the programs that some of the students are located at.
Okay.
And we do look very carefully at
Right,
that, Charmaine, believe me.
One last question on the.
You know, if you don't mind, just as a follow-up to this, you know, at one point, a number of years ago, and I can get you the exact years, we had 73 students out of district. So we've reduced that significantly by creating programs in district. What we really have now is, and the part that makes it a little challenging is we don't have a cluster of students with the same types of needs that we're sending to the same location. So, for example, we have students going to 12 different schools in addition to BOCES, and BOCES could have 5 or 6 different program types. That's Cap Region BOCES, and then we also have kids going to Questar BOCES. So, you know, if there were a number of students in the same kind of program, it's something we look at every year. We would want to bring those students back and provide that program here. It's something that we look at every spring to see if we should be doing that for the following year.
One thing I noticed about the salary and position information, where there are 12 speech therapists and 6 of the occupational physical therapists. Can you just give me a sense of why the number of speech therapists is double? Is it just the need
Sure.
is different, or?
Well, a speech-language pathologist works with students with articulation needs, language, receptive, expressive. They work on comprehension and reading. Speech and language impaired is one of the 13 disability classifications. So there's a much, much higher percent of students. For example, we have 204, I believe, students identified as speech and language impaired. OT and PT is more of a related service, so we have very few students identified as just orthopedically impaired. So those services across the board are much less than the speech-language service.
Yeah, it's probably more for Judy. The state reimbursement, is it the same for a special ed student as it is regular student, or is there a formula that's different for special ed costs?
There are multiple formulas. There's private tuition cost reimbursements, there's high cost, there's like 3 separate aid categories.
Right, okay.
So that's all tracked, those cost records are all input by the clerical staff, it's overseen by the CSC chairs and Kathy, so that's all submitted, it's called STACK process, where that data is captured, and then those reimbursements flow back to the district.
Okay, so we're not absorbing the whole cost of an
No,
out
no.
of school placement?
I have one more question, just on the special education salary and position information slide. You have the 7 psychologists and 8 social workers. Do you know off the top of your head what schools, like how many are at the high school, how many in the middle school, how many sort of elementary school?
Of each of them?
Of well, no, just, there's a slide that says, it says the nurses slide. You know, you can go down to that one.
That one.
Where are the psychologists and where are the social workers?
We assign, we make sure that there's an assignment of a psychologist to every single building. The larger buildings, like the middle school and the high school, have 2 assigned to them. There is not a full-time psychologist at any of the elementary buildings. They go amongst buildings to do evaluations, participate in child study team, support the special classes in those buildings. But, and then the social workers, same thing, they're assigned to an elementary, but there's currently 2 at the high school and 2 at the middle school.
Thank you.
Are the only students that receive speech services ones with IEPs, or do some general ed students receive any?
Currently, it's just students that are identified as having a disability. We used to, Lynn, years ago, do speech improvement services, but we don't have the ability to do that anymore.
It's a shame.
Anybody else have any questions? I just have one for the 3 special ed teachers. I know you're the ones that are retiring. What buildings are they? Are they at different buildings or?
Different buildings, yeah. So we're going to have to look carefully again next year at where people go.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
Sure.
I was just curious, David Cooper.
In terms of proposed cuts, they're talking about getting rid of the guidance program at the elementary school. Do special needs students receive, would that increase your budget because of that elimination? I mean, do guidance counselors in the elementary school provide services to your special needs students?
Guidance counselors provide services to all the students at the elementary
Right,
level,
no,
but no mandated services.
Okay, but I guess my question is if you got rid of those guidance counselors, would that cause an increase to your budget, potentially?
Not to the budget, no. I mean, if you're talking about, I want to be careful about this, Mr. Cooper, because the guidance counselors aren't seeing, they're not doing an IEP service.
Okay.
So, I mean, they have a valuable
Right.
program that they're offering,
I'm not
and
trying
some
to-
of our
I'm not trying to
kids.
imply that they would need those services. I'm just trying to figure out if they're filling in for some, so they don't cover any IEP services that would normally be covered. They're not doing any of those roles in that.
Some
Maybe
of
that's a
them
better-
will,
Maybe that's
yeah.
a better way to ask
yeah.
the question.
There are some guidance counselors that are seeing students with special needs. I'd have to look exactly at whether they're coming from an
I
IEP.
mean, I'm just trying to get to a cost savings because we're looking at saving a certain amount of money, but I'm wondering if that might be offset. That's all.
I could prepare that information, get it for you.
Okay. Anyone else? And again, Kathy, I mean, I know your department has taken so many hits, and your staff has been awesome, so thank you.
There's a lot of them here, so I
So-
do thank them all for
You-
that.
Do you guys want to stand?
As we draw to a conclusion this presentation, one of the things that we had mentioned is that we wanted to summarize over the past several weeks of meetings, sort of what you've seen at Mattel, below Mattel, into one finite list. One of the things I would caution everybody, the column in yellow has TBD in it. That's because the priorities have not been set at this point. There is a meeting from each of the administrative teams in a coming week that will be provided to the board roughly about 1 week from Friday, so that you have that to look at before our next meeting. And this list at this point is broken down by 2 tiers. Tier 1 roughly is reflective of the items that have been identified if we were, say, at the maximum allowable tax levy limit of items that would be considered there. That amount, however, only adds up to about $707,000. We need roughly $1.044 million. The tiered level 2s are considerations below Mattel, or if needed to go into. It's hard to position each one, but these, again, have not been prioritized. So you'll see a major change in this list as we go forward. And those tier 2 amounts roughly add up to about $1.27 million, for a total of about $1.9 million of identified potential reductions. Obviously, I think Ms. Monroe, as well as Ms. Johnson, Ms. Kehoe, and I have emphasized, it's not easy sitting up here for several straight years saying that these are possibilities. But unfortunately, we also did not think that we'd have 4 straight years of having to look at reducing our budget because state aid is constantly being reduced. It's getting better, and it's hard to say, but it still is a difficult situation. So that's the list, and I wanted to turn it over to the board in just a second, as with this list, the board needs to also look at it, and it will be posted on our portal as well as put on the website tomorrow, so that you have some positioning, and if you could, just, at this point, indicate some of those things that are those top priorities, lower priorities, which is right now something that we would need to look at if there's any non-negotiables that people are considering as an administrative team before we bring it back to the public. But, Ms. Bierman?
Yes, I have a question. I'm very glad you put that up because I think I'm either missing something or
Okay.
something. Because if you look at, if I'm interpreting that correctly, Tier 1 total as of 3/20, you have 707,400,000. Yet on the PowerPoint today, and I checked off all the items, if you scroll up a little bit and don't even include the transportation, so stop right after the .3 science teacher. See
Right
that at the
here?
21.2, yep. If you included all of those, in the PowerPoint, it's totaling $857,800.
Okay,
Yeah,
this
and
is in
this-
PDF
so-
form, so I don't know if there was a transfer saving thing or
Because that's
an
a
error.
big difference.
Let me check it, and I'll make sure I get that, check the formula with it. But every item that has been identified in the PowerPoint is up here, if you
Yes, I
checked
checked
over.
them off, and, because that's
So
what
it
I was
looks
like, what's the difference?
There
So-
potentially is a calculation error in one place or the other.
Yeah, which one is
Okay.
the correct one?
We will double check and get that up and make sure that what we post tomorrow is accurate between the two. Unfortunately, I don't have the, like last year, next meeting I'll have the live document.
Okay.
This is the PDF because without the priority, it makes it difficult
Okay.
because I don't want to sort it.
All right, because it's just, that's a big difference, and that doesn't even include
Yeah,
the
because that, I think
transportation.
you have about $180,000 difference between what you were saying.
150.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions in regards to this list?
Can we make comments on it?
Sure.
You know I'm going to make comments. In regards to the foreign language PE consolidation in sixth grade, I think that's a huge mistake, to take foreign language as being every other day starting in sixth grade. Every study shows it needs to be started in elementary school in order to get the full effect of foreign language. Not only learning to speak the language, but understanding the culture. We're starting it too late in sixth grade, and now we're going to make it an every other day thing. I think that's incredibly difficult. I think it's going down the wrong way. I think it's deprioritizing foreign language, which is more than just foreign language. It's learning culture. I think that's a big mistake to do there. In terms of the athletics, in terms of PE, I know I asked you to comment about whether that would be only for students who participated in Bethlehem sports teams, and I know I'm sure that's not decided, but I would only go for that if in lieu of that, they were not taking a study hall, because I don't believe they should be trying to get out of here students with the bare minimum of what they can get out of high school. They don't appreciate, the majority of kids don't appreciate the education they get. From their standpoint, it's free at this age. Everything else they're going to have to pay for. We should not be allowing them to get out with the bare minimum. It should not be what Bethlehem's about at all. And obviously, I have a huge problem with decreasing the sports teams down to these levels. You're going to cut a third of your athletes to save $150,000. Every adolescent medical journal tells you the kids need to be involved in sports and activities. It keeps your graduation rates up, it keeps them in class, it keeps them from smoking, it increases self-esteem, it decreases suicide risk, it decreases teen pregnancy. Everything that's positive that we need in this school is coming from those, and we're going to hack it apart. And I don't agree with going from 4 to 3. I certainly don't agree with going from 3 to 2. I think if you ask the majority of people in this room that are here, yourself, Ms. Monroe, myself, board members, Mr. Landry, Mr. Klugman, sports played a huge role in our high school careers. And because of state aid and pension cost and health insurance, we're taking it away. And it's a huge part of how we got to the success that we got to. And we're taking it away. And I just think it's wrong. If the town voted, they don't want the new facility, but that doesn't mean we don't need the sports. Middle school is a tough time for kids to get through. And you're putting those kids together, you're helping them with self-esteem, you're doing all that, you hack that away, you're going to have more problems than it's worth, definitely. And the same thing if you hack away freshmen. That's the hardest year, coming into a new social environment, and now you're hacking that away. So when I look at this, I say, what would I, replace it with? How many full-time monitors are there in the high school? How many do you have?
Mr. Landry? I think it's like
Seven?
6 or, yeah, 7?
I would rather get rid of all of that and save, 35,000 times 6 or 7, because my understanding was the teachers had to monitor during their off periods, or the staff had to monitor during the off periods. So if you said, well, where are you going to come up with the money? That's where I come up with the money. And I would have the staff that you have do the monitoring and give the kids every positive thing that we can possibly give them. So that's my 2 cents.
And I think I think that's going to be our thing for, in 2 weeks, we're going to be discussing this. You basically just wanted us to look at that and kind of prioritize within our own.
Well, in your thought process, if you think there's something that's a non-negotiable, let us know.
And you want that tonight?
It could be tonight, it could be next week. I mean, it could be on the 17th. For us individually, it just helps us sort of position some of our prioritization too, before we bring it to the board, and really the board has that full board discussion. Because right now, we're looking at this, and until the board finalizes the parameters of where they feel we should be, not just on reductions. That's the hard part I don't think a lot of people in the general public understand. The board's going to have to make about 3 decisions. What amount of reductions, what amount of fund balance, and what the ultimate spending plan is. And notice, I didn't say what the levy is. We are just estimating a levy. We are developing the spending plan, and that levy could be estimated, but like last year, we estimated at 1, and then with reassessments or reevaluations, it actually was lower than what we actually advertised, which is a benefit, but it's still the same pot of money that's coming from.
Okay.
So those 3 decisions are going to have to be made. The process, similar to what we used last year, is we had 1 full meeting devoted to that discussion and a summation of that, of where you think you'd like to be, and the last meeting setting and adopting the budget.
Okay, are these additional if we go below the 3.75?
Right now, the items that you've seen here will have to be prioritized.
Okay.
That equates about almost $2 million. On our initial chart that was there, I think at 3.75, it was 1 million. I think at 3.0, it was roughly around 2 million.
All right, now I'm a little confused.
1.04.
No, but that 1.4.
1.4 at 3.0. Good, thank you. I just didn't have that. And then what goes down to 2 million? 2,078. Thank you. 2,078 would bring it down to roughly 2%. So right now, just by what's identified, gives you the range between Mattel and about 2%.
So if we took the 3.75, this is safe?
No.
Say that again?
I guess I'm looking for my sliding scale, I guess.
To get to the 3.75, we need about $1 million in cuts.
$1 million
These are part of the cuts, yes.
Of this,
Okay.
or something else that's identified, if that's identified. If you change the amount of fund balance that you wish to apply, if you drop the fund balance from 1.75 that we've used as our base, down to say $1 million, now instead of 1.04 million in reductions and a 3.75 levy, you would need about $1.8 million in reductions. Everything is interactive to each other at this point. So those 3 decisions sort of make another decision for you in one of those 3 columns.
Okay. Usually, I think your administration will prioritize some of this for us.
Yes, we have a meeting with all the building administrators and department heads, I think for Tuesday, to have that, and as soon as we have that, and then also sort of play our devil's advocate against each one and trying high, low, and looking at what we did last year as well, because if you notice, a lot of this comes from last year as well. We'll have that, and we should have that out to the board at least, so you can review it and start to
Okay.
review it by Wednesday before the break.
Okay, so and you'll do that little sliding scale of where they are? Okay.
Next meeting, we will have a full live, so that if something needs to be changed, it can be resorted. And then it will also have a running total tally right next to the cost. So now it's basically, all you have to do is look, here's 1.04. If you say 1.2, we can tell you the percentage as well.
Okay.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know what, I think if there's a lot of questions on this, we're going to discuss it. Let's take a break so our participation in government students can sign out.
Yep.
The what?
Yeah, the sheets.
Up now. Okay. I think we ended with, Mike had a question?
Well, actually, I just wanted to make a comment based on Kate's comments about the athletic cuts, and I agree with her that athletics are wonderful for the students. The problem we face is that some of these cuts may be out of our control because a lot of the suburban districts are looking at cutting the levels of sports, so we may not be in a position to offer a level if there's no competition. And everybody, all the districts are sort of playing hot potato to see who's going to drop the potato first. And so I just wanted to say that, you know, we may have to make that decision, and it's not because we don't value the athletic program, but if there's no competition for the students to play, then to have a program is somewhat meaningless.
I was just,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I need some more time with this, and I really would value the priorities that are gonna come, because I kind of soak it all in and digest it. I do appreciate the initial list, and I'm looking forward to the discussion that we have every year. Thing goes up and down, we hash it out, but I personally need a bit more time to just take it all in. I probably have my favorite things here and my least favorite things, but I just need time to digest it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Charmaine, because this is new to me too, for tonight, for this
Yeah,
part of it.
Can I add to that
Yeah.
too? Because I think we need to have time to look at it. Plus, probably by the time we're actually discussing it, maybe we'll have more information on the revenue side, which may be helpful. And I really want to know, you know, exactly what the administration wants. I mean, I'm not here daily running the schools or anything, and I just think it's important, you know, to have that information, like where would you, you know, want to do it if we have to, you know, make these cuts.
No, I think the board has made some very nice comments. One of the things that if I can just expand upon is that whether it's in sports, whether it's in our athletic teams, whether it's in our curriculum, whether it's in our personnel, the administration is really trying to look at the data points to say, we can do this because this is our outcome or the impact that it will have. That's really what's been going on as we've developed each one of these presentations. However, it happens in sort of the executive or the higher levels in consultation with the building management, but it's not at that point where we've all been together. So that's really what next week is about, with all the administrators coming forward. And what happens is, there's some positions that we feel we probably are overstaffed in. The general public would not know that. Sometimes even as administrations, we have to look at it and then we find out, can we do this in a restructuring or a different way, or do we need more staffing in other areas? So it's a give and take, and I think once the administration gets into the room that's across the district, it makes this come to more meaning and justification, because it's not about anyone pointing the finger, we need this, or I need to protect this. It's about what at this point, because the district, as well as districts across the state, have been through this year after year for the past 4 years, what is left? I can tell you, there's not much. Everything starts to impact. Enrollment has helped, but it doesn't help entirely. Reductions, every reduction up here will have some type of impact. How we handle that impact is yet to be seen, and that's part of that discussion. And that's what will enter into priorities. Just like we also have to balance the political scope of this with the community, because ultimately, as we've said last year, we said 2 weeks ago, we make the recommendation to the board either accepts or modifies our recommendation, and then they make a recommendation to the community. Ultimately, the community decides, and no matter what, we're trying to balance that the best with the deal that we've been handed. I will like to say that we're hearing very much chatter, and I like to do this. I've confirmed from a source, i.e. the Spotlight newspaper reporter who's right here, is really that something's happening up at the Capitol right now. We're hoping that they're going to have a deal. That also enters into it. There is a deal now? So now there's officially a budget deal. We can't change this real quick, but we'll try to get that information as soon as possible. I know members of our community, and I want to thank everybody, because this is how in tune this community is. I get informed by another member of the community. One of the assemblywomen wants to get to me for Saturday because they expect a budget deal, but they just don't know what the numbers will be most likely until Saturday. So that's how it works, and luckily we're in a community that does stay attuned to that. So thank you for everybody and your help throughout. And as we get more, we'll try to make the best decisions, sort of like, you know, a doctor in an operating room. You're trying to make the most strategic decisions in some of the worst case situations so that overall the person, or in this case, the district, goes forward and is prosperous as best as possible.
Can I ask one more question? I would assume that you will entertain suggestions. We aren't on the ground, we don't know what's happening. But for example, Kate said, what about the monitor situation? If board members have suggestions on where they would like you to at least look and assess,
Please send them to me. I can tell you already, I saw Jody typing. She's probably written it down already. So that would be one of our discussions as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
Anything else?
Only thing I just want to, you mentioned before about, you know, how much we should use of the reserves, you know, fund balance, and we just have to be careful there too. We need to have money to save money, because if we use up too much, we might end up in the situation like Niskuna, where their bond rating was lowered because they had used up a lot of their savings. And so to borrow money, then it's going to cost more, and then we're kind of defeating the whole purpose.
With the vote, we want to be extremely cautious of that as well, just because of the fact our bond rating could be impacted rather quickly and change. So we want to make sure that we're adhering to that. One of the other avenues that we will present, and I've already talked to Judy about this, for the next presentation, one of the things we did last year at the same time is we gave you what we thought our plan would be if we had considered challenging the levy limit. If we didn't, what our deficit was each of the years for 3 years out. We will be preparing that. Right now, we will prepare that based on 1.75 million in fund balance. That just change, all of it does is changes our numbers from the year to year by the exact amount, either lower it or raise it. We would be very, I think, without even talking to Judy, we'd be very cautious about raising it anywhere above that. Preferably, our intention this year was to be at 1.3 million. However, we didn't expect to lose an additional $1 million in aid. We expected to be flat. So that's, we'll wait to see what those numbers are in the new budget picture.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, yes.
I'm very curious.
If you could just state your name, please.
I'll learn how to do this one. Ellen Driscoll, Department of Transportation. I'm very curious if there's been any more discussion, any more information or projection concerning the gap elimination adjustment funding that would provide, or that's education money that the state is holding. I bring that up just because I know that this is really a time for political action. I wish this room was full. I know that the Transportation Department, just this week, we've had a very intense phoning thing. We've made, there's a list of 14 different senators and representatives with a very easily scripted couple of sentences to say. And I did it yesterday. I made 15 phone calls. And I was very surprised that at least half of the people taking the phone call were very supportive and said, this is really what you need to do, and keep doing it. Keep calling, because it does make a difference. They keep track of every single phone call, and they give that information out, and it goes to the floor. So my question, this all boils down to this gap elimination adjustment funds, and what are we doing, what are you doing to take some of these issues back to the government, back to these people who are holding these funds that we need so desperately, instead of just getting so embroiled and overwhelmed by trying to deal with these numbers and making these cuts and trying to figure out these impacts, to go back and sort of demand as citizens, you know, we pay their salary, they work for us. Don't make yourselves work for them, and the kind of wheeling and dealing that's going on that's unfair and not right. And, you know, we really should be calling those shots. So I know those were a lot of incomplete sentences I just made, but I think you get the gist. What are you doing there? Or are you so tangled up in these numbers that you can't get back to a point of political action that might make a difference for your bottom line?
We were down, we just
Yeah,
mentioned it
I'd like
earlier
to
about
say
being
that-
downtown last
Right.
week.
I mentioned in the beginning.
And
We did in the
When-
beginning.
when
we
I
did at the
talked,
beginning of the meeting.
when I talked about the, during the board report, I mentioned how it was state lobby day for the New York State School Boards, and Lynn, myself, and Dr. Douglas individually met with Assemblyman Fahey, and she met with us for over an hour. She is very supportive of the gap elimination and restoration of state aid. Senator Breslin met with us for about an hour also. He is very supportive. So we're hopeful. You know, word is that there's a budget now. They have been very supportive of the restoration of the money back to the district, specifically the items I mentioned.
Right.
If we call them, if we call Fahey and Breslin, like call
Yeah.
will that?
Can't
Yeah,
hurt.
I
but
think
I
all
mean,
those
I-
things are on our website too, right? We've had a lot of
Yeah.
letters and stuff.
I think there is a budget agreement, so what's happened has happened, but it doesn't, I would continue throughout the year contacting your legislator and let them know that you want them for, you know, if it's done now, start working for next year. It's not too early, because they need to have the pressure on them constantly. And I know Assemblyman Fahey is very supportive of education. She had told us she met with the speaker, and that education is her #1 priority, that she's focused on that.
And then Lynn, if you want, you can talk a little bit about NISBA, because they had provided several things too.
Right, I mean, there were other people actually recently I've met with too, like Senator Kachik and,
Right.
you know, other legislators downtown. And certainly, there are actual advocacy experts that work for NISBA that are down there all the time advocating for us. But on that particular day, there were several members visited. And certainly, and I mentioned earlier too about Senator Breslin, like individual board members or administrators or whatever, we need the parents, soccer moms,
They,
community members.
If I can, they pay attention to the masses. And one of the things that this Board of Education has been very good at, and I think the administration has tried to get out through our communications, whether it's through SNN, our website, is that we've been asking for a call to action. We appreciate the work that the BCTA and the BCUEA have done in especially the past several weeks. One of the things I think both Assemblywoman Fahey and Senator Breslin said is, as well as some of our lobbying initiatives that we invited the community to come to, and some members have come out. They've written letters. Recently, there was a letter from Kim Nankoon, who is PTA president for the
Times
district.
Union.
There was supposed to be another letter, I think, by Ms. Jen Valley that's going in the Times Union. These are the things that are part of advocacy. It's still new for school districts, but there's a lot more initiatives going on this year. And that's why when I mentioned that at the beginning, they have been hearing from this district. That's the one thing we heard from Senator Breslin's office and Assemblywoman Fahey's office. They've heard more, and for Assemblywoman Fahey, this is her first year, but that's her. She didn't list anything else. That's her number one priority. But it's not just with the budget being done. Advocacy for some will end now. There's no end for this advocacy because right now you've got 365 days before we're at the same point again. And we hope that we'll see increases, but that didn't get us very far from last year to this year. So we have to do a job. Assemblywoman Fahey is going to be invited to our board meetings just like Senator Breslin. To every one of the schools, PTOs, PTAs should be inviting these individuals out, one, to highlight our story to them, and also highlight their need for us to assist them in their work. And that's an ongoing advocacy. But guess what? The hard part is after a budget's done, everybody sort of decompresses. And we can't, unfortunately, for 4 years, we can't really take that risk for a fifth year. So keep up the work. Keep it up with the BCUEA. I know the BCTA is keeping up. I know the BPA is. This board is. But that's really what's needed is ongoing, even if this budget deal is done.
Well, thank you for underlining what you did bring up in the beginning, but it kind of went over my head. So I request that at your next meeting and subsequent meetings, put a real priority on passionately presenting what you're doing in this area, who you've met with, and galvanize your audience when we're all here that this is making a difference and we have to keep doing it and try to build this into become a real dynamic of your meetings, much more so, so that we sound and feel less like victims and more like, you know, actors on the stage of making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rest of the meeting?
Can I just say one thing? Just in terms of I know next week you're working on the administrative priorities, and I know you guys are just seeing it for the first time, but I think it'd be helpful to us, the public, if those priorities, once they're established by the administration, could be somehow, if at the same time you get them, as a board, we could also see them so that we could, so that we have some insight coming into the meeting, knowing where the priorities are versus coming to the meeting and saying, okay, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and being surprised. You know, not surprised, but just if possible, that's all.
Depends what the board, until it's an official document, I always have to caution the board. Please, Dave, just for a second. Nothing is official until the board acts upon it, and that's the hard part. And we have to be very careful of improper practices of board meetings and so forth. However, what I could say is that as we prepare for the next meeting, when we post our board agenda items, I don't have a problem with posting it at that point, so you have it 3 or 4 or 5 days before the meeting.
Under the FOIL law, Judy and I talked about this last year, whatever the board sees as part of their action, even if it's not final, the public's supposed to be seeing. I understand that those priorities aren't set in stone, but we're.
No, they aren't. Not until it becomes an official record.
Well, I don't know,
Yep. I can understand that.
Yes.
Hi, my name's Kate Gaffney. I have a kindergartner at Hammergrail, and I have a 3-year-old, so it's hard to come out at night. I wanted to say that last year I was so proud of this board for exceeding the tax cap. I am in the school in the morning dropping my son off at Schools Out, and the teachers are there. I pick up my son at Schools Out. The teachers are there. I'm very concerned about cutting more staff. I do agree with the APPR requirements. There is a stress level here that is unimaginable. And I would just like to ask this board, I'm very scared for my children coming into public education. And I think that you really do need to seriously look at these cuts. They're all terrible. And I'm willing to exceed the tax cap to make sure that my kids have a quality education.
Thank you.
Put it into the comments now. I have a comment generally about the budget, if you prefer to proceed with the program and?
You can talk now, that's
Okay.
fine, everybody else is. Just if you could state your name, please.
Okay. My name is Donna Rosen. I'm Jamie's mother, and I have a son who's a graduate of Bethlehem. I'm here to address the potential cuts in the guidance staff. My understanding is that I think it's characterized right now as a Tier 2 cut, but that there would potentially be 1 to 3 cuts in guidance staff, which is slated for the elementary level. I am not as attuned to guidance needs on the elementary level, other than hearing so much about bullying and anti-bullying efforts, so it does seem to be inconsistent with that, to be cutting guidance staff. But what I wanted to highlight is that my understanding is that because of the implementation of seniority rules in the contract, what actually would happen is that there would be 1 or maybe 2 guidance counselors in the high school that would be supplanted by the elementary school counselors. And that's something that I do have a lot of familiarity with on 2 different levels. The guidance staff at the high school is astounding. You know, from my personal experience with my children's guidance counselor, as well as what I've heard anecdotally from their friends and their friends' parents. They're an enormously skilled workforce. They have a gigantic workload, one that's, I know everyone has recognized, increased so much in the last several years because of cuts. They range just a broad spectrum of responsibilities, from getting high school curriculum established to really helping the kids with their college search and getting them on track and, I think, placed as best as possible. I also see it, I'm an alumni representative for a large university that attracts a lot of Bethlehem students. And so I actually have the opportunity to talk to the applicants about different kinds of experiences that they've had with their guidance counselors. And I'm astounded, really, by the levels that some of the guidance counselors go to help, they go above and beyond to help the kids and to meet their individual needs. So to me, and I also wanted to say, and I won't elaborate more, but there is, the guidance staff has many, many, many years of experience. I'm sure the elementary counselors are very skilled as well, but I think in a totally different sort of realm of responsibility, and it would really be to the detriment of the high school students to take somebody and try and expect them to serve that function without the years of experience that our counselors have had. Thank you.
Thank
I also wanted to say, I'm really, this is somewhat bittersweet for me being at the board meeting, but we have so many talented, I'm struck by all the talent that we have on the board, and Judy, and, Al Karam, and all the people, through Mr. Klugman, the people through the years that I've had the opportunity to deal with. We have so much talent here, and I'm very grateful for that, so thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to join the free-for-all, if you don't mind. My name is Dan Cunningham. I have hopefully some helpful suggestions. One, you should number the slides, because people are flipping back and forth. That's the easy one. I'm really here tonight to talk to you about an experience I had last night. I attended the public hearing of the Bethlehem Industrial Development Agency, at which they were considering the application by Columbia Development for a tax abatement on a property to be built out at Vista Technology. The abatement is roughly in the range of $1 million. Over $500,000 of that is school taxes. The abatement is made on the strength of one tenant who has tentatively agreed, I should say the abatement application has been made on the strength of one tenant who has tentatively agreed to occupy the space. It's a pre-revenue company, biotech. It is a technology company. I have a little bit of experience in startups, so I know that there's a great deal of risk associated with this type of company. For example, with biotech, there's a long FDA approval process that these companies have to go through before they can be commercially viable. So it's fair to say, I believe, that the town, the IDA, is rolling the dice on this company in granting a tax abatement. If, in fact, they do that, the decision will be made at 8 o'clock on Friday morning at the regular IDA meeting. Now, the Tier 1 abatement, The application is for a Tier 1 abatement, which is roughly 100% tax abatement for a 2-year period of time, and then with a declining abatement over the remaining 12 years of the benefit. This particular application, they're also asking for a waiver on sales taxes and mortgage taxes. I'm here tonight because of the roughly $500,000 that will disappear from the school budget if this abatement goes forward. Now, when Ms. Kehoe got up last night to speak to the board, the IDA board, she mentioned that she was representing the school board last night, and that the opportunity looked good. I don't mean to misquote you, so please correct me if I have this wrong. The opportunity looked good. She also mentioned that the Town of Bethlehem IDA tax abatements used the term middle of the road last night in terms of what neighboring communities do when they try to prime the pump for businesses coming into their areas. Well, in truth, the Bethlehem tax abatement is not middle of the road. In fact, whereas we offer 100% abatements for Tier 1 companies, the town of Colony provides up to 95%, and the town of Guilderland up to 50%. The town of Guilderland won't consider abatements for office buildings. That's what we're doing here. They also have, both towns, Colony and Guilderland both, have very strict guidelines. They're looking for quality companies that they can invest in through this tax abatement program. Our program here is not like that. It is not middle of the road. We have very generous benefits, and as I alluded to earlier, the companies coming in are not necessarily quality investment opportunities. When we are looking at this, this was a timely discussion tonight for me, coming in here and seeing all of the sacrifice that has to be made in the school to meet the budget. When we're looking at cutting $2 million out of the budget in order to keep the tax rate increase at a reasonable level, it strikes me as odd that the school board would support a $500,000 tax abatement for a company that, in my personal opinion, stands an 80-20 chance or 20-80 chance of succeeding. Just so you know, 20-80 is the normal success rate for startup companies. So just by statistically speaking, they have a 20% chance of succeeding. And we're giving them a $500,000 that comes out of the school budget. That's money we need here. I, like everyone else in town, endured an increase in the school taxes last year. I'll be paying for capital improvements because the bond vote that was conducted last week. I also incurred, as you did, an increase in county taxes last year. And we all got hit with our FICA taxes when that benefit disappeared. So our taxes are going up. We're going to show another tax increase this year, 3%, 4%, something along those lines. I simply ask that if the town board or the school board is going to participate in endorsing IDA applications by companies coming into town who potentially bring growth opportunity, that you pay a little bit more attention to the details of who you're endorsing, what application you're endorsing. I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you for letting me to speak now, because now I'll go home and take care of my kids who are waiting anxiously for me to get there. Good night.
Thank you.
We did not endorse that.
We don't have a choice.
Yeah, yes,
We
please.
should go out to the public that we endorse that, because we didn't.
The district has been watching the development that has been talked about for this Vista campus for quite some time now. It was really in the planning stages for, I think, close to 10 years. The economy had declined noticeably, and that had really delayed it. When the first round of projects had come through, we had attended the public hearing as well and offered up comments in support of that economic development. Similarly, last night, we had gone to that hearing, and I had spoken to what you had referenced as middle of the road, was really noting that there are a range of abatements that are in the various communities. And depending on how competitive those abatements are, it determines where this development will ultimately occur. In this case, you're citing that there is a significant reduction to the district based on those abatements. Indeed, the other way to look at that is, in fact, by offering the competitive abatements that the IDA and the town were proposing, that growth does come to the community. And in fact, where it was undeveloped land, where there is nothing, there will be additional revenues that come to the town based on those agreements. In this past year's budget, in fact, we had close to $40,000 in additional revenues coming to the district based on those first pilots that were in place. So the comments were offered in support of the advancement of that development, seeing the benefits that had already come to the district, and speaking in support of the future benefits that were projected. We, of course, can't give odds as to the viability of any company. That's really based on the developer and the tenants that they bring to any given project.
No, we don't have a crystal ball, and I wish I did.
Well,
Do I understand then that the board did not endorse the application? Who then, who were you representing then, last night?
Yeah, I think this was a couple years ago, right? That when they first started
There
coming
was a
in.
public hearing last night for the next round of endorsements. So we had discussed it internally, and that given the growth of the project and the vista that we've been talking about for years,
If I could
there
just ask
wasn't
a question.
notice to.
It doesn't seem that it was discussed internally, because I'm
You know what,
hearing-
normally, we don't normally have that back and forth
I know,
conversation.
and I was
so-
actually ready to leave, but now the questions have come up. You know, when Safeway came in, that was $1 million abatement there. Safeway would have come here anyway. There was no reason to do that. And we can go down the list. My doctor, I went out there Tuesday to see my doctor, and I told him that I hope I got well because I'm paying a lot for his presence in there. He moved from Albany to here. That wasn't job creation. The company that's coming in here now is bringing 10 employees. They've already got these employees in-house. That's not job creation. I simply ask that in the future, you look at these things a little bit more closely. What's happened has happened.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the presentations tonight? Okay. Let's see where we are. Finance, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following finance action item A, the claims auditor report.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries. Professional personnel, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following instructional staff action items A through E. So, second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Support personnel, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following support staff action item A.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That carries. And correspondence for action, it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following correspondence action item A through E.
So moved.
Is that a first and a second? Any discussion?
Can I add
Yep.
one update on that? On the extension of the, would go through June 7th.
Okay. Think you'll change that for Michelle for the minutes?
Yes.
I actually do have a question, and it's unfortunate Al's not here. The summer transportation cost, was that an increase from last year, what they're proposing, the charges?
It's a slight increase based on a cost escalation. I don't have the exact figure on
Okay.
that, but that's the standard methodology that he uses to calculate
All right,
that.
thank you.
Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. I think we did the visitors. Was there anything on a non-agenda item? Good. Future meetings, Wednesday, March 27th, we have a board retreat. Wednesday, April 10th, BOCES annual meeting. Wednesday, April 17th, a regular board meeting. We'll be discussing more of the budget. Tuesday, April 23rd, BOCES budget vote, and then Wednesday, May 8th, a regular board meeting. Also, I just wanted to mention too, Mike and I, both our seats are up for this year. So if anybody's interested in running for the board, you have to pick up the petitions at the district office, Judy's office, right, the business
Yes.
office? And it has to be in by, what, is it April something?
April 20,
I have it
Should
here
be on
somewhere.
there 30 days
Yeah.
before.
in fact.
Is it April 21st? Sometime in April. And then I do think you're going to run again, right? And I'm going to run again, so. Why can't I have that date right there.
I got it in a second.
Probably-
April
is it on the bottom of the
22nd.
form?
Yes, it is, you're right.
April 22nd. Yep.
April 22nd. Yep.
Now, are we going to wait to decide if that April 23rd meeting on that Tuesday, whether we change that to an evening meeting?
If we need to? Oh, yeah.
I would suggest that you do change that to an evening meeting, just because that would be the adoption if the board didn't come to a resolution on the 17th.
Okay.
My feeling is
We're
that
not
the
going to.
discussion, you'll get close, but you may not be totally
Yeah,
there.
I would agree. Let's
Change
do
that
that
then to 7 PM then? Okay,
Okay?
instead of 7 a.m.
yeah.
So we will
Yeah,
make
thank
that
you.
change.
And that's a Tuesday too, so make sure we note that. 'cause
Yes.
Normally we have it on a Wednesday. Yeah, I agree. I think we're going to need that.
Yeah, and this is the night that the budget must be adopted by, according to the state regs.
And a reminder, Diane, that the retreat is closed this year.
Oh, okay. And the retreat is a closed meeting because we're doing staff evaluations. Or no, board-
Self-evaluation.
Self, board self.
Can I
That's what I
ask,
meant.
on the April 23rd, change to
Board
7,
self-evaluations.
on April 23rd at 7 PM, is it going to be an executive session before that, do you know? Or you don't know?
Which one?
This April 23rd, 7, we changed it from 7 AM to 7
7
PM.
PM.
7
There would
PM,
be an
and yeah, we'll probably
executive
be
prior.
Okay.
Anything else? Did I mess up anything else?
I move to adjourn.
Second to adjourn?
Second.
We don't have to go to
Yeah,
executive
yeah.
session. So Lynn, move to adjourn, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Please.
Any opposed? Carries. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you,
I'll
everyone,
catch
for
you
coming
another
out.
time.